Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tim Huxley, Executive Director of the International Institute for Strategic Studies Asia, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the 21st IISS Fullerton Lecture, which will be delivered here in the ballroom of the Fullerton Hotel in Singapore by Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar on the crucially important topic of relations between India, the United States, and China. With the extremely generous encouragement and support of the Fullerton Group, which owns and operates this magnificent heritage hotel, we initiated the Fullerton Lecture Series slightly more than 3 years ago with the intention of stimulating informed debate in Singapore and its region regarding political, economic, and security issues of international importance. From the beginning, we have worked to ensure that the series presents the widest possible range of international viewpoints on some of the most important topics of the day, and that the speakers in the series address topics from the most authoritative perspectives. The series began with an address by the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and has subsequently included lectures by the serving presidents of Mexico and Ukraine, current and former prime ministers, and a number of foreign ministers. It's wonderful, but not at all surprising, that we have such a good audience here this afternoon to listen to Dr. Jaishankar, Foreign Secretary in India's Ministry of External Affairs. It's a real pleasure to welcome the Foreign Secretary back to Singapore, where he has many friends and connections. He has almost 4 decades of experience as a diplomat. He's represented his country in Moscow, Washington, Colombo, Budapest, and Tokyo, and has also served in the Americas, policy planning, and East Europe divisions of the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi. He has been press secretary to the President and has served as ambassador to the Czech Republic, High Commissioner to Singapore from 2007 to 2009, ambassador to China, and before taking up his present post as Foreign Secretary in 2013 as ambassador to the United States. I think it's fair to say that Dr. Jaishankar has had a profound influence on many important aspects of India's foreign policy. In relation to China, he has advocated deeper bilateral cooperation with the crucial proviso that India's core interests should be respected. He was involved in negotiating the civil nuclear agreement and also expanded defense cooperation with the United States. When High Commissioner in Singapore from 2007 to 2009, he oversaw the comprehensive economic cooperation agreement, which allowed, among other things, the significant expansion of the Indian business community here. Given his instrumental role in developing India's relations with both China and the United States, no one could be better qualified than Dr. Jaishankar to address the important topic that he'll be talking about today. He will speak for around 20 or 25 minutes, after which there'll be an opportunity for members of our audience to ask questions of the Foreign Secretary on topics relevant to his address, and also, of course, other aspects of India's foreign policy. Foreign Secretary, the floor is yours.
I need this. Can I give you this? Yeah. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Dr. Huxley, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to deliver the 21st IISS Fullerton Lecture today in Singapore. As a member myself of the International Institute of Strategic Studies, being invited to do so is a particular source of satisfaction. This invitation also brings me back to Singapore, where I have so many warm personal and professional memories. It's good to see friends sitting in the audience. I hope they'll be kind in the Q&A session. So all in all, really, it's good to be back. The topic for today's talk is India, the United States, and China. I have represented my country in both the US and China fairly recently, and have had a close association with both these relationships. But this triangulation is not just an outcome of my personal experience. I would suggest that the interplay of India with the US and China is among the key factors that will determine the strategic balance in Asia and beyond. Singapore naturally has an interest in the dynamics of that process. Therefore, I hope that sharing insights on the current state of these ties would be of some value to all of you. Each of these states is undergoing both external and internal transformation as we speak, so this exercise is not entirely without its complexities. I'll begin with India, not just because I'm from India, but also as it is a country where change has been sharpest in the last year. This has seen the emergence of a very different global sentiment in regard to this nation. That is a subject in itself, and on this occasion, let me limit my remarks to the foreign policy implications of a government led by Prime Minister Modi. To begin with, the approach to India's neighbours has undergone a big shift, symbolized by the invitation extended to their leaders when the government was first sworn in. Since then, we have seen themes of greater connectivity, stronger cooperation, broader contacts dominate India's engagement with them. Even in a short span of time, some results are already evident. In the case of Bangladesh, it includes the settlement of the land boundary and major connectivity and infrastructure initiatives. With Nepal, the long-standing potential for hydroelectric power is beginning to be tapped. India was not only the first responder during the earthquake, but also the principal contributor to its subsequent reconstruction efforts. With Bhutan, a traditionally strong relationship has been further consolidated. A sub-regional grouping involving all these countries is taking forward the connectivity and cooperation agenda. Ties with Sri Lanka, after elections in both countries, have increasingly focused on their national reconstruction and reconciliation. Myanmar remains our gateway for look and act East policy, and the possibilities for cooperation grow as they open up. To India's west, the relationship with Pakistan has its share of challenges, but is part of the neighbourhood agenda that I mentioned earlier. Our prime ministers met a week ago and agreed on steps to counter terrorism and strengthen peace and tranquility on the border. We hope to take that forward. Where Afghanistan is concerned, managing the consequences of the drawdown of foreign forces is the primary exercise underway. India supports an Afghan-owned and Afghan-led reconciliation process within the framework of the Afghan constitution and internationally accepted red lines. Our traditional friendship with the Afghan people has been reinforced through an effective development program in that country. With Iran, the resolution of the nuclear dispute and the lifting of sanctions will allow our agenda of energy and connectivity cooperation to unfold seriously. Beyond the immediate neighborhood, be it Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia, or the Middle East, we see fertile ground that needs more sustained cultivation. Nations there seem ready to respond to a more business-like India. India's maritime interests are significant, and I would remind you that we are a nation with a 7,500-kilometer coastline, 1,200 islands, and an EEZ of 2.4 million square kilometers. What happens to our south is of great consequence, not least because of our trade and our energy imports. In recent months, considerable thought has been given to an integrated Indian Ocean strategy. It is obviously one devoted to safeguarding our mainland and islands and defending our interests. We seek to deepen economic and security cooperation, especially with maritime neighbors. This has been reflected in cooperation on exchange of information and coastal surveillance, building of infrastructure, and strengthening of capabilities. We believe that collective action and cooperation will best advance peace and security in our maritime region. We see an integrated and cooperative future for the region that enhances prospects for sustainable development. And we think that those who are resident in this region have the primary responsibility for peace, stability, and prosperity in the Indian Ocean. Insofar as larger international politics is concerned, India welcomes the growing reality of a multipolar world, as it does of a multipolar Asia. We therefore want to build our bilateral relations with all major players, confident that progress in one account opens up possibilities in others. Also of note is the more regional approach to engagement reflected in the Prime Minister's recent visits to the Indian Ocean, Northeast Asia, and Central Asia. Summit-level meetings with the Pacific Islands and Africa will take place in India for the first time this year. You would have already noted more energetic diplomacy that seeks a larger and deeper footprint in the world, supported by soft power initiatives like the International Day of Yoga. The transition in India is an expression of greater self-confidence. Its foreign policy dimension is to aspire to be a leading power rather than just a balancing one. Consequently, there is a willingness to shoulder greater global responsibilities. This was demonstrated recently in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations in Yemen and then in Nepal. It is also reflected in our role in peacekeeping and in keeping the maritime commons safe and secure. And it is affirmed by India's active participation in important global negotiations. An aspect of our current approach, while having implications for the entire world, has a special relevance for its two largest economies, the United States and China. India is endeavoring to modernize in the fullest sense of the term. This is expressed in a variety of programs ranging from Make in India, Digital India, and 100 smart cities to Skill India and Clean India. It seeks resources, technology, and best practices from our international partners. That is very much at the heart of our diplomatic engagement today. Both the US and China, and indeed the ASEAN, Japan, ROK, and Europe, can contribute to this transformation. The centrality of this commitment ensures that India will set a positive and interactive agenda with other major powers and groupings. We look at the world, seeing more possibilities than risks, and are confident that in turn, India itself will be viewed as an opportunity by the world. At the end of the day, India's future is of a human resources power. That will be a key calculation in how others, including US and China, will approach us. Let me now turn to the United States and the state of our ties with them. There is little doubt that the US economy is in a recovery mode. It is probable that in pursuing its interests, the United States will seek to leverage its comparative strengths that include technology, finance, and its international partnerships. The issue then is the extent to which those partners have a convergence of interests with the United States. In the case of India, that is quite significant. Let me illustrate that using some recent examples. When President Obama came to India in January this year, the two countries agreed on a joint strategic vision for the Asia-Pacific and the Indian Ocean region. We affirmed our shared interest in safeguarding maritime security and ensuring freedom of navigation and overflights throughout the region. We opposed terrorism, piracy, and WMD proliferation. And we urged all parties to avoid the threat or use of force and pursue resolution of disputes through peaceful means in accordance with international law. The vast expanse of practical cooperation laid out on that occasion is also worth noting. On the economic side, there is the promise of expanded investment flows, collaborating on skills development, furthering India's digital ambitions, and expanding capabilities ranging from health to education. In areas where the United States has traditionally dominated, such as space, nuclear energy, and R&D, new collaborative initiatives were agreed upon. The entire spectrum, from defense, counterterrorism, homeland security, intelligence sharing, and law enforcement, are being taken to a new level. In global economic, political, security, and technology areas, the two nations are working together on a number of issues. The deepening and broadening of the India-US relationship has been among the key elements of a changing Asian calculus. This process, which has unfolded unevenly in the last 2 decades, has definitely acquired new energy in the last year. Obviously, the two countries would not agree completely on all issues, but their ability to work together is a factor worthy of serious consideration. With China, the changes are more nuanced, more complex, but no less significant. Again, I use the recent visit of Prime Minister Modi to China and his meeting with President Xi Jinping to illustrate my argument. On that occasion, the terminology agreed upon by the two countries to describe themselves were as two major powers in the region and the world. I would suggest, and I'm sure the China watchers in this room would agree, that this is not without meaning. The task which they have set for themselves is to pursue their national development goals and security interests in a mutually supportive manner. Clearly, this would only happen if India and China show respect and sensitivity to each other's concerns, interests, and aspirations. That the two neighbors, whose parallel, if differential, rise offers a somewhat unique situation in world history, agreed on a constructive model of relationship is no small thing. Past precedents in history have been largely otherwise. That this is not just a conceptual proposition. Those of you who would have watched the Modi-Xi interaction in Xian would have noted this approach reflected in their demeanor. The mood today allows for frank and direct conversations between the leaderships. Their shared appearances, including the world's most powerful selfie, and utterances would have been difficult to envisage a year ago. But as with the United States, it is what is happening on the ground that can make these sentiments sustainable. So let me talk a little about recent developments in that regard. On the economic side, the discourse has been traditionally dominated by the growing trade imbalance, a source of unhappiness for India as it reflects lack of market access. Admittedly, that continues to be a major challenge, one that the two prime ministers, Narendra Modi and Li Keqiang, agreed would be taken up by a high-level task force. But attention has now turned to the possibilities offered by investments. 2 Chinese industrial parks are under development in Maharashtra and Gujarat. Other private investment initiatives are moving forward. In fact, Prime Minister Modi's meeting in Shanghai with Chinese CEOs probably saw the strongest foreign interest that I have heard expressed in the Make in India program in all the visits that have accompanied him. Knowing the gaps between the two systems, there will be process challenges. That, I would delicately suggest, may be an opportunity for Singapore. Collaboration is also unfolding in a number of other sectors, especially in the modernization of India's railway infrastructure. The standard narrative of Sino-Indian relations, however, remains focused on the border dispute and security issues. Here, I would draw attention to efforts to enhance communications between the militaries, promote leadership level exchanges, establish more hotlines, expand border commanders' exchanges, and create more meeting points on the border. The political settlement of the boundary question is obviously a complicated issue, but there is recognition today that on both sides that peace and tranquility on the border is an important guarantor for the development and continued growth of our bilateral relations. We are also moving to address the familiarity gap in the relationship, an outcome of the difficult parts of our shared history. New policy and governance level mechanisms and platforms have been formed recently. Promoting contacts between think tanks and media have been given a special boost. Sensitivity displayed in respect of religious tourism has gone down well in both countries. The direction we are moving should be clear, even if much work remains to be done. So my message to you today is that India engages the world with greater confidence and assurance. It does so with the intent of ensuring stronger growth, greater connectivity, closer integration, and deeper harmony. It wants to expand its commonalities and manage its differences. It is prepared to shoulder greater responsibility and expects that this would be duly reflected in the structure of the international order. With specific reference to India's ties with the US and China, let me say that we approach them both positively. In doing so, we look beyond 20th century orthodoxies. Kishore Mahbubani, writing of the great convergence some time ago, wondered if geopolitics would derail it. Even as realists, we should calculate that our shared stakes in prosperity and stability will temper risk-taking. After all, realism applies even more to economics than it does to security. Signals, however, remain mixed, though the more alarmist scenarios have proved unfounded. Asia will, no doubt, go through some uncertainties before arriving at a new equilibrium. Other factors and other nations will definitely have a say too, among them ASEAN members, Japan, or Australia. Shared power, if it works for all parties, will be at the heart of Asia's emerging security architecture. And that, I believe, warrants following this triangle very closely. Thank you very much.
Foreign Secretary, thank you very much for your excellent address. You talked in some detail about how the Modi government is pursuing a more active foreign policy approach linked to development programs at home. You talked particularly about India's relations with its immediate neighbours and region in the east and south and west. You talked about an integrated Indian Ocean strategy, and then you went on to talk in some detail about India's developing relationships with both the US and China in their various dimensions. And in your conclusion, I think you said something very important about the need for India to approach both China and the United States positively, and the importance of the notion of shared power in the emerging regional security architecture in this huge Asian region. Well, I think there's a lot of food for thought there, and there's now an opportunity for members of our audience to ask questions. If you wish to ask a question of the Foreign Secretary, could you please raise your hand? The microphone will come to you, and if the microphone does come to you, could you please then say who you are, what you do, or who you're associated with, and ask your question as briefly and as in a pointed a fashion as possible. Thank you very much. Who would like to ask the first question? Sir, Simon Tay.
Mr. Secretary, I'm Simon Tay. I'm the chairman of the Singapore Institute of International Affairs. Welcome back to Singapore. Secretary, I know that you've talked about two very big players, United States and China, very important. And may I ask a bit of a hard question? Two other players which really are in the frame facing same dilemmas but haven't been talked about. One is ASEAN, and I think President Modi, Prime Minister Modi, has been very active overseas, but not so much, of course, in ASEAN as a whole, though he's been in Singapore. The second question is about, so basically, do you see the chances of ASEAN working with India or in a way trying to make their policies in parallel? The second issue is about Pakistan. China's steps towards Pakistan, you've talked about win-win. Would Pakistan be part of that, or is there some degree of competition and pressure there?
Thank you very much, Simon.
I think I was constrained by the fact that I had to come up with a definite topic and limit myself to some countries in the world. So I think the fact that I haven't addressed our other relationship is in no way an implication that those relationships are less important. Where the ASEAN is concerned, I think at one level, there's a very strong continuing recognition that ASEAN played and plays a very important role in globalizing India. I mean, the whole Look East, and now we are trying to communicate a sense of urgency to various ASEAN-related projects and policies. So we keep telling people, act East, don't just look East. I think that continues very much. If you look today at individual relationship with ASEAN members as well as our collective ASEAN relationship, the importance of the EAS in India's foreign policy, I mean, you can see the huge difference that ASEAN has made to our foreign policy in the last 25 years. Having said that, I think we have some real issues to address, including connectivity issues, and I specifically mentioned Myanmar here because until we get our physical connectivity to Myanmar in better order, the ASEAN remains somewhat distanced from us. So we are actually devoting a lot of attention to that. We have, we are today involved in building the trilateral highway, some parts of the trilateral highway. We have a big connectivity project to the port of Sitwe. And overall, the Myanmar relationship has a certain prominence simply because it is the part of ASEAN which abuts us. In fact, I myself, in the short tenure that I've had in my current job, have already been twice to Myanmar. So I would just say to you that this is something which is important. Whether it's trade, resources, as a window to the world, as an operating base. I think ASEAN means different things to us because and what. We also have stakes today in strengthening ASEAN. I think it's important that the coherence and the solidarity that has kept ASEAN alive continue, and that's very much in our interest as well. The other question, Pakistan. Well, I did mention that Pakistan is part of the neighbourhood agenda. I mean, it is somewhat different neighbor, I grant you that. But the fact is, whether it is trade, whether it is connectivity, I mean, all the logic of the neighborhood also applies to Pakistan. I mean, but we have disputes with Pakistan of a nature that we really don't have with any of our other neighbors, and that does make the relationship that much more challenging. And what the China-Pakistan relationship means in that context, I think again, the issue for us is really whether the nature of that relationship impinges on our security interests or not. And and recently on our sovereignty as well. So those I think are live issues, and obviously we will continue to deal with.
Thank you very much. Mr. Surya.
Yeah, Surya Narayan from the Institute of South Asian Studies, and welcome to Singapore. So if I could inject a little bit more of geometry into the triangulation, from the Indian perspective, is this triangle a right-angled triangle, meaning that the US might help India become a leading power and also help India safeguard its interests better in relation to China? Or will this be a totally an acute angle triangle, which would mean that India will be on its own in navigating the triangular equation forward? And secondly, there is this issue of core interests and core concerns with regard to China and Pakistan for India. And recently, two issues have impinged on the core interests and core concerns of India, namely the release of Lakwi in Pakistan and the route map of the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which impinges on India-Pakistan boundary issue. How does India plan to address these two issues beyond expressing concerns to China in diplomatic gatherings? Thank you.
Well, I think if I remember my geometry, I wasn't very good at geometry, but you know, I think I can fairly confidently, I mean, it's clearly not an equilateral triangle, it's not an isosceles triangle. I think each of these triangles is the length is different. But I would say, frankly, if India is to raise its ambitions and raise the level of its game, at the end of the day, India has to do it. You know, you can sort of utilize for foreign partnerships to help you and take you along, but your long-term calculation cannot be posited on other people's game plans. Otherwise, they are really not sustainable. So my own sense is today, the mood in India is that, look, we are a country which we should have reasonable ambitions, we should be doing more, we should be making our presence felt, we should be helping the world as well. I mean, I'm not putting it purely in transactional terms. And a lot, you know, and I think that's in many ways been a shift in the sort of sense in which today foreign policy is being implemented. You know, when you look at our responses to different negotiations and different situations, I think that is coming through in different ways. Where you refer to, you know, issues like the Lakwi problem. Lakwi is the one of the prime accused in the Mumbai terrorist attack case. And the other issue which Mr. Surya Narayana raised was, for those who are not familiar, the China-Pakistan economic corridor passes through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, on which we have a claim. So yes, these are issues. I think we don't shy away from them. I mean, they are discussed publicly, they are discussed privately. They were discussed when Prime Minister met, when he was recently in Ufa, when he met President Xi, and when he met Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. And I mean, in today's world, I mean, when you have disputes with people, you reason with people. So obviously, we will continue reasoning with the parties involved.
Thank you very much. Sir.
Dr. Jaishankar, welcome back to Singapore. Atul from Global Schools Foundation. My question is more on Make in India. And the question is very simple. The campaign has been very successful. And as we speak with many people around the world, it's really catching attention for people to consider investing in India. But is India having the right administrative structure? For example, DIPP, which is led by Mr. Amitabh Kant, has been doing a fantastic job. He's a great individual. But does it need to be elevated to something like a Ministry of Economy or a economic development board in Singapore context, which has far larger powers and is able to really meticulously follow up on large leads coming up from various parts of the world? Because I think the large big-ticket investors would need a lot of confidence and comfort in dealing with getting the central administrative processes done. So the question is does India need to really revamp the sector side?
Mm-hmm. Well, my own take, I'm in a sense part of the system, but because I'm from the foreign ministry, we have a certain objectivity when it comes to this issue. I think the challenge is not of elevating it and, in a sense, centralizing it. See, what India needs is for the routine to work, not for the exceptions to work. So if the routine bureaucracy on, 24/7, 365 days a year, this really works, I think that's really what we are trying to change. And bear in mind that when you actually come down to manufacturing, you are actually going to states. So it isn't, again, a central government issue alone. It is also what happens sort of where the rubber hits the road, and that's in the states. There has been in the last year a continuous sort of campaign to make it easier to do business, for Indian business, because unless we make it easier for our own business, we won't make it easier for foreign business. Businesses don't, in real life, come in two categories. So I think that's been very much at the heart of the process of change, because finally what people are looking at today is employment. Only manufacturing can give us the numbers that a country like India needs. People talk of India being a young society and demographic dividend, but you get a demographic dividend only if you can create employment possibilities. And you can only create employment possibilities if you expand manufacturing, which is really a very, very, uncomfortably low proportion of the GDP. Today, it's 15-16%. So pushing up industrialization, pushing up manufacturing, and getting the system on a routine basis to respond better, I think that's, to my mind, the real challenge. Yes, there will be cases, big cases, where we will have to do hand-holding. We'll have to do hand-holding because you need to demonstrate examples to change sentiment. So people need to see successes to believe that change is happening. But I would still say that, to me, would be a process on the way. The real change would come when actually the SOPs at the state level start changing.
Thank you. Sir.
Foreign Secretary, my name is James Tang. I'm from the School of Social Sciences at Singapore Management University. Earlier on, you indicated that India wanted to approach both China and the United States positively. At the same time, you also said that India as a major country is not going to be reactive. India wants to have a proactive approach to what's going on in the Asia-Pacific area, I guess. But obviously, all the major players now have projected very different visions of what they want to see in this part of the world. The United States still, I think, talks about the pivot. Xi Jinping in China talked about Chinese dream, and now the Chinese are also talking about this looking west, one belt, one road. India seems to be emphasizing act east. I'm just wondering what sort of India's own vision. You also mentioned shared power. I'm just thinking about what sort of, is this a contest, or is this sort of, you are seeing a different way of structuring international relationship, and you see India playing a more active role in this part of the world, and what would that be? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, no, thank you for that question. I think it is natural that different players would express their interest in different ways. You mentioned in the case of China, it's China Dream on this side, it's Go West on that side, it's One Belt, One Road. So the combination of these kind of give you a sense of what the Chinese are tabling. I think it's in the nature of Chinese policy making to define their goals in a certain way they find neat phrases, and I personally think it's a very admirable trait. It helps you to understand the thinking of the Chinese better. Others may not quite do the same, but they have tabled their interests or indicated their interests in different ways, perhaps not with the degree of clarity. Maybe in some cases, they haven't also got their practical projects on the ground to the extent the Chinese have. In our own case, I think we are moving in that direction. I mean, clearly, when we say look east or act east, it's a certain messaging to the ASEAN. It's a messaging to the world about the centrality of the ASEAN-led processes in our foreign policy. I think in the recent months, you have this phrase of neighbourhood first, which is, again, a message. And a lot of this are to your own people, because your systems must know what is it that you've all agreed to do? What is your national goal? So when we say today neighborhood first, it is a primacy of a lot of these connectivity, cooperation projects, expanding contacts in the neighborhood, that we are prepared to put in more money in the neighborhood, prepared to deal with them very differently. So that's the messaging out there. I think we'll have to, as we get more active, clearly we'll have to invent more phrases. I can see my creativity department working overtime there. We just came from a tour of Central Asia, where the Prime Minister visited, I think for the first time by any Indian Prime Minister, all 5 Central Asian states back to back, other than Russia. So there is, today, as capabilities grow, as interests expand, as opportunities grow, as confidence grows, a country like India will set out its goals for different parts of the world. We will come up with something probably for the Middle East as well. Now, the challenge would be in a very dynamic situation where, different economies are growing at different paces. You really don't have too many precedents and practices to go by. We are moving into uncharted waters. I think Asia is moving into more uncharted waters than other parts of the world. But except I don't think that somewhere there is an inevitability of a contestation, because there is dynamism. Dynamism doesn't automatically translate into powers contesting each other. I mean, yes, there will be some jostling, there will be differences, there will be argumentation, but there will also be the shared interest. Nobody has an interest in rocking the boat beyond a point, hopefully. So I think you will see this duality, that there will be new agendas coming on the table, but there will also be new mechanisms to reconcile those agendas. So I would sort of see it more like restructuring a company. New shareholders, different shareholders, the shares are changing, maybe some new board of members in the board of directors, maybe some independent directors. Now, how do you get this company to sort of do business better than it used to?
Thank you. Professor Kanti Bajpai.
Kanti Bajpai from the Lee Kuan Yew School. I have 3 very quick questions. Maybe they add up to one. The first is there reluctance on India's part to get involved in the Silk Route concept that the Chinese have advanced? I mean, we're in the AIB, the New Development Bank, but there's a certain kind of hesitation that you sort of sense on New Delhi's part in respect of the Silk Route. So that's my first question. Is that true, and if so, why? The second relates to India's recent, I guess, full membership now in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization within a year or so. Is there going to be a quid pro quo, which is that we will accept with other SARC members that China will become a full member of SARC from its current status, which is, I guess, an observer? And third point relates to the Pakistan-China-India relationship in a slightly different direction from the one that you pointed to, which is China's continuing very deep involvement in Pakistan's nuclear program. I think at last count, at least 4 to 5 new reactors coming online to be built by the Chinese. And we know that the Pakistani weapons program, at least in respect of fissile materials, is growing very, very fast. So while the Chinese involvement is civilian, there may be implications for the military as well. So my question, I guess, if sum all that up, is are things more complex and difficult, perhaps, than you've suggested in respect of the China relationship? India is somewhat reluctant on the Silk Route, even though we talk about connectivity. India hasn't been very forthcoming about perhaps China being a full member of SARC. And are you worried about the growing Chinese involvement on the nuclear issue with Pakistan? Thanks.
First of all, on the Chinese connectivity initiatives, let's sort of, they've aggregated them, different initiatives into one belt, one road. You see, where we are concerned, this is a national Chinese initiative. The Chinese devised it, the Chinese created a blueprint. It wasn't an international initiative that they discussed with the whole world or the countries which in some way or the other have an opinion or who are affected by it. So if there is a national initiative and a country is going ahead with implementing a national initiative, it is not incumbent on other countries to necessarily buy it, because a national initiative is devised with international interest. An international or regional initiative has other interests which are reconciled into that. So where we stand is that if this is something on which they want a larger buy-in, then they need to have larger discussions. And those haven't happened. Now, insofar as AIIB is concerned, we have no hesitation. We are actually the second largest shareholder of AIIB. We made our AIIB decision well before a lot of other countries did. So, there was this last minute haste once some countries broke ranks with each other. But we were not part of that. We made ours much, much earlier. And we did so from a very sensible calculation that AIIB will provide a new source of financing. The world needs a new source of financing for development projects, and that kind of long-term funding of development projects is, the demands are growing, the sources are drying up. So we welcomed a new player, and we felt we could help shape it and join it and strengthen it by being in it. So we don't have a reservation about AIIB. I think for us the issue, I would separate the One Belt, One Road issue from the AIIB issue. On the full membership of the SCO, yes, at UFA, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization welcomed India and Pakistan as members, full members, for whom the membership negotiation begins. So there is a membership process, so we have to go through that. People estimate that it will take us a year. But this is something that is done on its merits, because the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a functional group. It's not a geographical group. Whereas I think in the case of SARC is, the operative words of SARC is South Asia. SARC is a group like ASEAN. ASEAN has a geographic connotation. If tomorrow, let's say, Iceland wants to be a member of ASEAN, Iceland is not located in Southeast Asia. So it's difficult to bring in Iceland. So I think we shouldn't really compare apples and oranges here. I think SCO has a very clear sort of functional, non-geographical connotation. SAARC has a geographical connotation. So I think trading that is something which doesn't appear logical to me. In the case of the China-Pakistan nuclear collaboration, see, for us, it has been a source of concern that when we did our nuclear understanding with the United States and then broadened it out to other countries, we went to the NSG for approval of the understandings. So we played by the rules, we went through a separation program. So I would say we made a huge effort to be in conformity with global norms, both in the nature of the program and in the transactions that we do with other countries after that. So when we see the developments between China and Pakistan, and then look at where the NSG stands on this, I think it is something more than us, it is something the NSG should be asking itself.
Thank you very much. We have time for one or two more questions on the left-hand side here at the back.
Hi, my name is Xing. I'm from the Ministry of Defense. I have two questions to you. My first question is, what is the perception of the Indian leadership towards the rise of China? And the second question is, how much do you think generally the Indian leadership understands the Chinese leadership?
Well, I think when you say rise of China, I mean, people, the rise of China has happened. Okay. So it is not an issue of whether you like it, don't like it, what are your views. It's a reality. It's like, what are your views about, I don't know, about the sun rising in the morning? I mean, it's going to happen whether you have views on it or not. I think in many ways, and I'm speaking now currently, I think people look at what happened in China and say that they try to see what lessons there are for us. That if a country which went through the travails and difficulties and problems that China did could today reach the level that it has, as probably the only other country of a commensurate size, I think there are clearly lessons there for us. I mean, now the systems are very different, the history is different, I grant you all of that. So I think when people look at China today, yes, they are certainly not impervious to the fact that a major power has risen in our immediate proximity, that we have a complicated history with China, all of that is there. But at the same time, they also look at the fact that here is a very large part of humanity which has actually improved its lot in a very dramatic fashion. I mean, when you say China has risen, it's really 20% of the world solving its problems in some form or the other. So the other 17% of the world looks at it and say, there could be something in this for us too. In terms of how do they communicate? Well, I think right now I would say the President Xi and Prime Minister Modi have met 5 times in the last year. And I've been present at 2 of those meetings, in China and then recently in Russia. And they clearly have a very, comfortable chemistry. You can see that, look at the pictures, see how, how they deal with each other. And My own sense is that the ability to communicate is actually good, possibly has improved in recent months.
Thank you very much. We have time for just one more question in the middle of the middle row.
Sumita Narayanan, Rajaratnam School of International Studies. I would like to, my question would be on Iran, and you did mention the broad energy and connectivity spheres of India's interaction with it. And as someone who did recently visit in June, I was wondering with the nuclear deal, how do you see India's relationship with Iran progressing, like certain, more specifically, not just like broad energy connectivity? And I guess that would be my focus on the question right now.
Well, I was in Iran in early June, but by that time, most people in our business took it as a given that the nuclear agreement would happen. So it was more a when than if it is an if. And while the details of the nuclear agreement were obviously very important for the countries who are negotiating it and the countries who live in the immediate proximity of Iran. For us, the focus was much more on the impact that the sanctions have had on the relationship, and then in a post-sanctions situation, how do you look at possibilities that have come up? There are two broad areas of interest for us there. One is Iran as an energy power. Iran still is a very major supplier of oil to India. But because of the sanctions, its market share had come down. I think rebuilding that relationship, improving the market share, improving the market share is their concern. We would be looking at the possibilities of investing in Iran's energy sector, which till the sanctions are lifted is not obviously something which was a possibility. The other part of the conversations were regarding connectivity, because it's very clear to us that Iran is important as Iran. So I mean, it's a big economy, it'll be a growing economy, particularly in a post-sanction situation. You can see a lot of pent-up demands now sort of coming on the market. But Iran can offer us an alternative route. Initially, we used to think to Afghanistan, but we are also now increasingly focused on the fact it offers an alternative route to Central Asia. So there are regimes which regulate this. For example, there is an Ashgabat agreement, which really connects Oman, Iran, Turkmenistan, and Afghanistan and Uzbekistan. So we are, I think today, exploring with Iran the possibilities of building a port in Chabahar, discussing railway connectivity northwards, some road connectivity. We are already involved with them in the north-south transport corridor, which goes north out of Bandar Abbas. So we see a lot of possibilities there, and from our point of view, we welcome the nuclear understanding that was reached. We want normalization in that region. We think that a more a situation where there is a return to normal commerce and business would really be very much to the advantage of all the countries concerned. So you can expect a certain amount of activity there in the coming years.
Thank you very much, Foreign Secretary. I think we could go on. There are a number of people who would like to ask you questions as well, but unfortunately we have to stop here. Thank you for answering all those questions so frankly and in quite a lot of detail. And thanks to our audience for such a good range of questions. Your lecture today, and I think your responses to the points raised by the audience have really done a lot for our understanding of not just India's relations with China and the US, but of India's foreign policy and how it's developing more broadly. So I'd like to thank you very much indeed for that. I think the discussion that we've had today has very important implications for this region, including, of course, for Singapore. So we're very grateful to you for deepening our understanding of the dynamics of India's foreign policy and its implications. So thank you very much again for delivering the 21st Fullerton Lecture today. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.